Ngozi sat by the cracked window of her small soiled apartment, watching the rain trickle down in streaks that looked like the tears she had shed all night. Her daughter, Ada, lay coughing on the raffia mat behind her, sweat glistening on the child's forehead. Ngozi pressed a damp cloth to Ada's skin, whispering soft prayers that seemed to vanish into the thunder outside. Life had never been easy, but now it felt impossible. Her tiny stall at Balogun Market had been destroyed during a fight between rival street thugs. Every piece of cloth she once sold to survive was gone, leaving her with nothing but unpaid debts. As though fate wanted to mock her further, the landlord, Chief Balogun, had delivered an eviction notice that very morning. She had exactly 7 days to leave, or her belongings would be thrown out. Ngozi paced the room, clutching the paper. She thought about calling her relatives, but they had already turned their backs on her after her husband's death. Friends had grown scarce too. Nobody wanted to be near a woman drowning in problems. Alone, hungry, and with a sick child, Ngozi felt like a candle flickering against the storm. She pressed her hands against her chest. "Maybe my end is already here," she whispered. The rain outside seemed to agree, drumming harder, drowning her voice. In that moment, life looked like a dark tunnel with no light at the end. She was certain she was finished. But even as despair pressed in, she clutched Ada's tiny hand and vowed silently, "If I must fall, I will not fall without fighting for her." The next morning, the compound buzzed with noise. Children chased each other around puddles, women gossiped by the water tap, and the aroma of fried akara filled the air. Ngozi stepped out, her wrapper tied tightly, trying to fetch water for Ada. But her fragile peace shattered when Chief Balogun, the landlord, appeared with 2 hefty men behind him. "Madam Ngozi," he bellowed. His Egbada swayed with authority as he pointed at her. 7 days. If you don't pay, I'll throw you out myself." The compound went silent. Neighbors peered from their doors, enjoying the spectacle. Some pitied her, but others smirked. Ngozi bowed her head in shame, clutching her bucket tighter. "My child is sick," she pleaded softly. "Please, just a little more time." Balogun sneered. "Sick child or not, rules are rules. Your end is near. Pack your load before I disgrace you." Ngozi fought back tears as she returned to her room. She thought of selling her late husband's wristwatch, the only memory she had left of him. The thought cut her like a blade, but survival demanded sacrifice. That night, she lay beside Ada, staring at the ceiling. Every knock at the door made her flinch. Every sound of footsteps in the compound made her think Balogun had come to throw them out. Fear grew heavier than the rain pounding on the zinc roof. For the first time, Ngozi began to wonder if Chief Balogun was right. Her end was truly at hand. 6 days passed. The deadline loomed like a shadow she could not escape. Ngozi pawned the wristwatch for a fraction of its worth, but it was barely enough to buy food and paracetamol for Ada's fever. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and hopelessness wrapped around her like chains. That evening, she wandered the streets of Ojuelegba. The city bustled with honking danfos, traders shouting, and the smell of roasted corn. But Ngozi's eyes were locked on the bridge ahead. She climbed slowly, her heart pounding. Below, headlights streamed like rivers of fire. Tays blurred her vision as she gripped the railings. Her body trembled with exhaustion, fear, and despair. "I am tired, Lord. I have nothing left. Maybe Ada will be better without me." Her voice cracked, carried away by the wind. She leaned forward, ready to let go. In that moment, the world seemed to freeze. The roar of traffic, the flicker of lights, even the rain felt distant. But just as her fingers loosened from the rail, a deep voice broke through the storm. "Don't do it." She gasped, whipping her head around. A tall figure stood behind her, drenched by the rain, his eyes steady and kind. "Your story is not finished," he said. His tone was calm, but it carried a weight that stopped her trembling hands. For the first time in weeks, Ngozi froze, not from despair, but from shock. Who was this stranger who had found her at her breaking point? Ngozi staggered back, staring at the man in disbelief. He was tall, broad-shouldered, perhaps in his late 40s, wearing a silk shirt that clung to his skin. His eyes held a gentleness she hadn't seen in years. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "Why are you here?" He stepped closer but kept his hands visible. My name is Chaik. I was driving home when I saw you. Something told me to stop. Ngozi laughed bitterly. You don't know me. You don't know my suffering. Chaik nodded slowly. You're right, but I know what despair looks like. I've seen it before, in my own eyes. The rain drummed harder, but his words seemed to cut through it. Chaik told her briefly of his past, how he once lost everything to betrayal and debt, how he stood on the same edge she did now, ready to end it all. But a stranger's kindness saved him. Ngozi's chest tightened. Could this be true? Was he another trickster, or was fate truly sending someone to stop her? She sank to the ground, tears mingling with the rain. I can't go on, she whispered. Chaik crouched beside her. You don't have to end. You just have to open one more door. In that moment, the bridge no longer looked like an ending. It looked like the beginning of something unknown. The next morning, Ngozi thought she had imagined everything. But as she opened her door, there he was, Chaik, standing with a calm smile and a bag of groceries in his hand. I told you, your story isn't finished, he said. The neighbors whispered furiously. Women at the water tap muttered about Ngozi's new lover, and Chief Balogun sneered. So this is your savior? Let's see how long he lasts. Chaik ignored them. He handed Chief Balogun an envelope thick with naira. Her rent is paid. The landlord blinked in shock, then greedily snatched the money. Fine. She can stay, for now. He walked away muttering, while neighbors gossiped louder than ever. Ngozi felt both relief and shame. Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me. Chaik's answer was simple. Because someone once opened a door for me, and now it's my turn. He then offered her something more, a chance to work at his small logistics company in Yaba. Not charity, he said firmly. Work, dignity, a chance to rebuild. As he left, Ngozi stood frozen at her doorway, Ada clutching her hand. She whispered to herself, almost afraid to believe it. Maybe this stranger's the door I have been waiting for. The compound had never been quiet, but now Ngozi felt as though every whisper was about her. The moment Chaik paid her rent, tongues began wagging. Women fetching water eyed her with disdain. She thinks she's better than us now because a man with money has noticed her, one muttered. Another added, watch, he will soon abandon her, and she'll return to begging. Ngozi held her head high, but inside, shame burned like fire. Every time she stepped outside to sweep the compound, she could feel the eyes of her neighbors piercing her back. Even Ada was not spayed. Children teased her, saying her mother had caught a rich man. It wasn't just the neighbors. Chief Balogun, humiliated by Chaik's bold gesture, sneered whenever he saw Ngozi. Enjoy while it lasts, he hissed one evening. That stranger won't always be there to save you. When it's gone, I'll remind you of your place. Though Chaik visited often with groceries or medicine for Ada, Ngozi grew restless. Was this kindness too good to be true? Everyone had warned her. No man gives without expecting something in return. The memory of friends who had betrayed her resurfaced, gnawing at her. That night, Ngozi stared at Ada sleeping peacefully and whispered, God, is this man truly a blessing, or another storm waiting to destroy us? A week later, Ngozi dressed carefully in a simple blouse and wrapper, her nerves trembling. Chaik had insisted she start work at his logistics company. The thought of stepping into a professional environment after years of struggle filled her with fear. The office in Yaba buzzed with activity, clerks shuffling papers, dispatch riders rushing in and out, phones ringing. Ngozi felt like an intruder. Chaik introduced her warmly. This is Ngozi. She'll be assisting in operations. Not everyone was pleased. Amaka, Chaik's longtime assistant, looked her up and down and smirked. From market stall to office desk, this is not Balogun Market, madam, she whispered just loud enough for Ngozi to hear. Ngozi's first day was a disaster. She misfiled invoices, confused delivery addresses, and accidentally offended a client over the phone. By noon, her face burned with humiliation. I can't do this, she muttered under her breath, fighting tears. But Chaik's calm voice steadied her. Nobody is perfect on the first day. Don't quit before you even begin. By evening, she was exhausted, but she noticed something different in her spirit. The same woman who once thought of ending it all was now learning a new world. Though clumsy, she had taken her first step toward rebuilding her dignity. As she left the office, she whispered to herself, "I failed today, but at least I tried. Tomorrow, I will try again." Weeks passed, and Ngozi grew more confident. She learned quickly, tracking deliveries, balancing records, even managing customer complaints. Chaik praised her determination, though Amaka continued to watch her with cold suspicion. One day, a wealthy client mistakenly paid double for service. Amaka leaned close to Ngozi, her eyes sharp. "Don't say anything. Nobody will notice. Consider it a blessing. You need money, don't you?" The temptation clawed at Ngozi's heart. With that extra money, she could finally pay Ada's school fees in advance, buy food without borrowing, maybe even fix the broken fan in their room. But something inside resisted. That night, she sat awake, holding the receipt in her trembling hands. Memories flooded her mind. Her husband's honesty, his belief that dignity mattered more than riches. Tears rolled down her cheeks. At dawn, she returned the excess payment. The client was astonished. "People rarely do this." "Your honesty is worth more than gold," he said. He praised Chaik for hiring her, telling him that Ngozi was a rare kind of woman. When Chaik heard, he smiled warmly. "Now you see why I believed in you." That day, Ngozi felt something she hadn't felt in years: pride. Not because of money, but because she had chosen the harder, nobler path. Even Amaka, though still distant, looked at her with a flicker of reluctant respect. But as Ngozi's confidence grew, so did Chief Balagin's fury. He couldn't bear seeing her thrive under Chaik's wing. Rumors were not enough anymore. He wanted to destroy her completely. He began telling anyone who would listen that Ngozi was Chaik's mistress, that she had sold her dignity for money. Neighbors whispered louder, and even some staff at Chaik's office began to look at her differently. Then one evening, as Ngozi returned from work, she found her belongings scattered outside. Clothes, pots, Ada's school books, all dumped into the muddy compound. Balagin stood proudly, arms crossed. "I told you, stranger or not, you cannot escape me. You are banished from my house." Ngozi collapsed to her knees, clutching Ada's school bag. Neighbors watched silently, some with pity, others with satisfaction. Humiliation stabbed through her like a knife. She had no strength left to fight. But just as despair threatened to swallow her again, headlights cut through the compound. Chaik's SUV pulled in. He stepped out, his face calm but his eyes burning with quiet fire. "Chief Balagin," he said firmly, "you will regret humiliating this woman." He helped Ngozi and Ada into the car, ignoring the whispers and stays. As they drove off, Ngozi pressed her forehead against the window, tears streaming. A small voice whispered in her heart, "This stranger is not just opening doors. He is fighting battles I never thought I could win." The following morning, Chaik took Ngozi to a quiet cafe in Victoria Island. Over steaming cups of tea, the air heavy with unspoken questions, he finally revealed more of his story. Years ago, he explained, he had been a successful businessman. But greed and betrayal from his partners left him bankrupt. Friends abandoned him, and even his family lost faith. At his lowest point, he had stood on the edge of a bridge, just like Ngozi. "It was an elderly woman," he said softly, eyes distant. "She pulled me back. She gave me food, a bed, and words that changed my life. She told me, when God saves you, it is not for you alone. It is so you can save another." Ngozi sat in silence, her heart pounding. The story mirrored her own night on the bridge. She studied Chaik's face, no longer just a stranger, but a man who had walked the same dark path she had. "But why me?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why choose to help me out of all people?" Chaik leaned forward, his voice steady. "Because I saw in your eyes the same fire I once had, the fire of someone who refuses to die, even when life buries him alive. I didn't save you, Ngozi. I only reminded you that your story is not finished." Tears spilled from her eyes as she looked away, ashamed of doubting him. For the first time in years, her heart began to believe that perhaps life had more to offer than pain. As they left the cafe, the morning sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow on her face. And for the first time since her husband's death, Ngozi whispered, "Maybe my end was never the end. Maybe it was only the beginning." The first time Ngozi noticed it, it was small, like a stone in a shoe, a question that refused to sit quietly. Chaik had restored her dignity in front of the whole compound, found her safe lodging, given her honest work in a clear desk. Yet doubt, sly and persistent, began tapping on her shoulder each evening as she washed Ada's socks in a plastic bowl and pegged them to the rusty line by the window. At the Yaba office, the work rhythm finally felt like music. Dispatch riders scraped their boots on the doormat, dropping signed slips. Printers hummed. Ngozi's laugh began to appear between phone calls. She was learning, and it showed, but so did the attention. Chaik checked on her twice daily, sometimes bringing roasted plantain, sometimes asking about Ada's malaria follow-up. The staff began to stitch their own story with careless thread. Big boss no day check anybody like that. A clerk whispered near the stationery cupboard. N.A. love be that. By lunchtime, the story had legs. When Ngozi passed the kitchenette, 2 junior staff fell silent mid-giggle. She pretended not to notice and lifted her chin. She had learned that dignity sometimes looked like silence. A market didn't bother with silence. She waited until the office thinned at close of business, then stood at Ngozi's desk, arms folded, nails lacquered the color of ripe hibiscus. "You're doing well," she said, voice even. "But Lagos doesn't give without taking. Men least of all." Ngozi kept arranging invoices. "And what exactly do you mean?" "I mean," Amaka replied, lowering her voice, "be careful with gratitude. It can become a leash if you don't know when to remove it." Her eyes flicked toward Chaik's glass office. "He is kind. Yes, but no one is a saint in this city." The stone in Ngozi's shoe shifted. Pain shot up. On the bus home, she stared through the window at hawkers slapping sachet water against palms, at a billboard promising miracle loans, at a mechanic under a tilted Honda shouting for a spanner. Lagos, city of hustle and riddles. She remembered men who had offered help with hands that later closed like traps. She remembered the landlord snay. She remembered friendship that ended at the first request. That night, after Ada drifted to sleep with a half-smile, Ngozi sat on the edge of the mattress, elbows on knees, the city's heat pressing down. Gratitude had indeed become a leash before, worn around her throat by a cousin who helped, until she said no, by a church brother who prayed but wanted midnight visits. She closed her eyes. "God, if this is a trap, give me wisdom. If this is a door, give me courage." The next day she greeted Chaik with a gentler, more professional distance. "Good morning, sir. Not good morning, Chaik." She declined the roasted plantain. She took the documents he offered with both hands, but did not let their fingers brush. Chaik noticed. Of course he noticed. For a second, something like hurt passed across his face. Then he nodded. "I'll be in a meeting till 3. Call me if the Apapa client rings." In the quiet that followed, the stone felt heavier. Doubt did not roar. It hissed. And sometimes a hiss was harder to fight than a shout. That evening, as thunder gathered above Surulere and wind pushed dust along the corridor, Ngozi pressed her forehead against the cool window and examined her heart with the same care she now used to examine delivery receipts. "I will not confuse kindness with bondage," she told herself. "But I will not mistake fear for wisdom either." The storm broke, and rain hammered the roof like 1,000 small drums. Somewhere in the rain, the stone shifted again. Still there, but no longer owning her steps. The invitation arrived the way Lagos miracles sometimes do, unannounced, slightly suspicious, wrapped in Sunday cloth. "My mother is hosting family tonight," Chaik said, standing near her desk with an apologetic smile. "She heard your jollof is famous," Ada told her. His eyes softened. "Come. No pressure." Ngozi's first instinct was refusal. Family was a room where her name had become a prayer said with pity or a cautionary tale told with sighs. But she saw Ada's excitement dance like light across water. "Mummy, please, I want to go." Ikoyi felt like a different country. The house, cream walls, and bougainvillea smelled of time and Polish. In the foyer, framed photographs lined the staircase. 3 boys at a graduation, a younger Chaik in an overlarge shoot, a matriarch in coral beads. Laughter spilled from a dining room where a long table glowed under pendant lights. Chaik's mother, silver-haired and graceful, stepped forward in a wrapper that whispered when she moved. She took Ngozi's hand the way aunties take newborns, carefully, fully, No, my daughter, she said. You are welcome. Her palms were warm. Her eyes studied Ngozi's face with a tenderness that felt almost remembering. Ada vanished with cousins to a backyard where suya smoke curled like calligraphy. In the kitchen, aunties argued about pepper level while banging lids. Ngozi, unused to so much comfort, stood near the doorway clutching her purse like a shield. When Chaik's mother returned with a glass of zobo, she touched Ngozi's forearm lightly. You remind me of someone, she murmured. Who? Ngozi asked. The older woman smiled, a soft sigh wrapped inside. A woman who refused to stay finished. Over dinner, spice fish, fried plantain, jollof that glistened like red silk, the conversations traveled. Football, politics, a cousin's new fintech job. But occasionally, a glance landed on Ngozi and then slipped away, as if a question had been asked and unanswered. Chaik's younger brother, Tobe, finally made the question walk. Bro, you never bring office people home, he said, grinning. This one is special. Ngozi set down her fork. The room shifted. Chaik chuckled, unfazed. Tobe, behave. But later, while others debated the Super Eagles' chances, Tobe caught Ngozi near the hallway where grandfather clock marked time like a patient drum. You seem good, he said, tone teasing but eyes sharp. Just know the doors you enter. Some rooms come with history. History? She asked, heartbeat picking up. He shrugged. This city remembers everything. Then he laughed it off and vanished into the crowd. On the ride home, Ada fell asleep with suya breath and greasy fingers. Streetlights braided themselves into a river on the windshield. I'm sorry for Tobe, Chaik said. He jokes without breaks. Ngozi watched the city slide by. Your mother is kind, she said. Her eyes carry peace. She taught me to survive my worst days, Chaik murmured, and to keep my promises. Promises. The word sat between them like an unopened gift. At her door, they stood in a brief, awkward quiet. Thank you, Ngozi said, for today, for letting Ada be a child again. Chaik nodded. Thank you for coming. He hesitated, then added, if you ever feel uncomfortable about anything, me, the job, the whispers, tell me. I will not hold you with obligations. After he left, Ngozi leaned against the door and listened to Ada's soft snore. Tobe's warning poured at her ribs. Know the doors you enter. She wasn't afraid of rooms. She was afraid of ghosts. Lagos was full of them. Paper ghosts, rumor ghosts, the kind that wore bardas and smiled. She turned off the light and whispered into the darkness. If there is history, let it be truth, not trap. Chief Balogun chose a Tuesday to strike. Tuesdays had a tiredness that made people careless. He waited outside the office gates in a starched white kaftan, a leather folder tucked beneath his arm like a weapon that obeyed dress code. When Ngozi approached, he smiled with all his teeth. My daughter, he purred, I came to congratulate you. Cash flow has favored you. Ngozi tightened her grip on her handbag and tried to pass. He stepped into her path, still smiling. You will want to see this. He opened the folder. Inside, photocopies, stamps, letterheads, the official scent of trouble. A dissolved company's memo authorizing the closure of multiple micro-stores in Balogun Market, Hayes among them. The signatures at the bottom were unfamiliar, faceless, but the letterhead bore the mark of a holding group she had heard whispered in tragedy, men who wore perfume and caused hunger. Why are you showing me this? Her voice came out thin. Because the man you now call Savior fed from the same pot, Balogun said, lowering his voice. Chaik invested in this holding years ago. Profit shared. Doors closed. He let the words hang like smoke. He ruined you before he rescued you. It's a common Lagos sport. Ngozi stared at the pages until the letters blurred. A part of her mind, the part trained by grief, clicked into a familiar gear. This is how the good collapses. This is a trick. Another part remembered Chaik's late nights in the office, his quiet eyes, Ada's new smile. True stood on a thin line and swayed. Even if he invested, she said slowly, that doesn't prove he knew. Balogun laughed lightly. Belief is delicious. Keep eating it. But if you want water, drink facts. He slid the photocopies toward her. Keep them. Consider it a gift. Inside, the office smells toner, a freshener, fried egg from the roadside, felt suddenly hostile. She dropped the folder onto her desk as though it might burn. For hours she moved like a person underwater, answering phones, stamping forms, hearing only Balogun's sentence swish back and forth. He ruined you before he rescued you. By late afternoon, her hand stopped pretending to be fine. She walked to Chaik's office and closed the door behind her. He looked up, smiled, then saw her face and stood. "Is it Ada? Are you?" She placed the documents on his desk. "Tell me the part you left out." He glanced at the folder, and something in his jaw tightened. He motioned to a chair. She remained standing. "Did you invest in these men?" Her voice trembled, then steadied. "Did your money help close the store that fed my child?" He did not rush into denial. He did not fling the papers away with practiced outrage. He rested his palms on the wood and nodded once, painfully. "Years ago, yes, I invested in that group. I was not on the operations side. I did not know your name. I did not know your store." He exhaled, but the damage was no less a size because I did not recognize its face. The room shrank. "So you are part of the reason my life became a pit, and then you met me at the edge of a bridge and called it purpose." His eyes closed. "No, I met you because someone once met me, because I wanted to become the kind of man who pays back the debt of mercy. I am trying." She shook her head, the laugh that escaped her throat sounding like glass. Trying is not the same as clean. She scooped up the folder. "Do not call me." Then she walked out into a corridor that looked the same but was not, and every step to her desk sounded like a door softly closing. That night she lay awake beside Ada and listened to the ceiling fan click and click and click. The stone in the shoe had become a blade. Pride and pain made a hard bread. Ngozi ate both. She resigned by email at dawn, a 2-sentence note that smelled of ash. She blocked Chaik's number and returned the office key in a white envelope with no name. When her bus rattled toward Soyalier, billboards advertised miracles she could not afford: loans, whitening creams, online courses promising 6 figures in 6 weeks. Lagos was a city that sold ladders and also sold the grease to make you slip. Money thin like old soup. The guest house manager tapped on her door with a nervous smile. The ledger did not accept tears. Ada's school sent a polite reminder that became a stern one. The mosquito coil burned to its end and left a black question mark on the plate. Pride, once a shield, became a quiet monster that dragged its feet across the floor at night and hissed, "Don't ask Chaik. Don't ask anyone. Drown alone if you respect yourself." Chief Balogun reappeared as predictably as rain in August, this time with soft hands and softer promises. He met her at the junction near the fruit sellers, his perfume too loud for the open air. "You know I can make all this go away," he said. "Voice syrup. A woman like you should not suffer. Let me handle rent. School. You just be mine." His eyes slid across a body with entitlement dressed as charity. Ngozi swallowed the acid in her mouth. "I would rather drink gutter water than owe you." She turned and walked, every step a fist clenched inside her. He laughed behind her, loud enough for the Moin Moin seller to hear, loud enough to stain the afternoon. "You will come back, dignity and all." She did not go back, but hunger did. By the second week, Ada's jokes lost their edges. "Mummy, we're having rice without stew again." The child tried to be brave. Children often are. Ngozi counted coins and bought a car for Ada and pretended she wasn't hungry. When Ada fell asleep, she licked the oil off the brown paper and told herself it was enough. On a humid Saturday, she took a small basin of second-hand scarves to a roadside near Ojuelegba to sell, returning to a hustle she once knew by heart. The sun sat heavy on her shoulders. Customers touched, haggled, walked away. By evening, the world tilted. A low buzzing filled her ears. She tasted metal. The last thing she saw was Ada's frightened eyes as a basin slipped from her fingers and scarves scattered like surrender flags. She woke to white sheets and the antiseptic scent of redemption. A drip ticked beside her. A fan turned lazily on the ceiling. Ada sat on a chair, swinging her feet, a plastic spoon in her mouth, jollof rice on her chin. "Mummy," she cried, standing so fast her chair scraped. "You fainted." But the uncle came. Before Ngozi could gather words, the door opened. Chaik stepped in, not with triumph, not with a sermon, but with the careful quiet of a man entering a sacred place. He looked thinner, tired around the eyes. "You scared us," he said softly. She turned her face away. "Why are you here?" "Because you are," he replied. He moved no closer. "I asked the nurses to run full tests. You're exhausted and dehydrated. You'll be okay." She stared at the drip to avoid his eyes. Silence arranged itself neutrally between them. Then he placed a brown envelope on the side table and did not touch it again. "Hospital bill. 3 weeks' groceries. Ada's fees." He lifted a palm before she could protest. "No strings. No leash. Call it restitution if you need a word." The word slid into her blood with a full fluid, warm, complicated. She wanted to argue, to defend her pain like land. But Ada was at the window, tracing raindrops with a finger and humming. Some battles, Ngozi realized, were cheaper won by putting down the spear. When the nurse came to check her vitals, she whispered a small prayer without shaping it for God to hear. "Teach me to be brave and also to be soft. Teach me the difference between a trap and a hand." Morning folded itself like fine cloth around the hospital. The corridors smelled of Dettol and fresh pap. Nurses moved in quiet choreography. Ngozi woke to the kind of tie that felt clean, as if her bones had been scrubbed of noise. Ada snored with a whistle. Chin tipped up, a small hand flung across her mother's waist. Chaik sat in the visitor's chair with a newspaper he wasn't reading. When Ngozi's eyes opened, he stood, then sat back down, then laughed at himself. "I never know how to behave with you," he confessed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You deserve carefulness I'm still learning." She watched him. There was a stillness in his face she hadn't noticed before, as if a fire had burned through and left a clearer air. "Why didn't you deny it?" she asked, voice low, "when I brought those papers?" "Because denial is a bandage that infects," he said. "I invested in a thing that hurt people. Not knowing your name does not clean my hands. I have been trying to pay a debt I can't fully count." She considered this, then reached for the envelope he had left. It was thick, money, receipts, a letter. She pulled the letter free. Chaik's handwriting leaned slightly right, like a man walking into wind. "Ngozi," it began, "I am not asking for trust one have not earned. I am asking for a chance to do right without performing it. Here are documents you can use against Balogun, evidence of forged notices, a record of siphoned tenant funds, a voice recording of him threatening an elderly widow. If you choose to fight him, fight with these. If you choose to walk away, I will still fund a new start, under another name, in another place, with a different employer if you prefer. I will not be your cage." She read it twice. The pages shook in her hands. "How did you get these?" "I have friends," he said, a small smile that did not reach smugness. "And I have patience." Patience. The word felt like a chair she could sit in. She touched the recording device, an oblong silver thing heavy for its size. "You did all this while I was refusing your calls." He nodded. "You owe me nothing. My promise didn't expire with your anger." Ada woke then, blinking like a puppy. "Uncle," she grinned, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "Nurse said I can eat meat pie later." "Then that is law," Chaik said solemnly, and Ada giggled. When she ran to the bathroom, Ngozi turned back to him. "I don't know how to hold this," she admitted. "In my life, help has always arrived announcing its price." "Then let this be different," he said. "Call it a door you can open and close. I will stand on the mat and wait." Something inside her unclenched. Not entirely. Scars did not dissolve in one morning. But a small lock turned with a soft click. "If we use these against Balogun," she said, "it will not be gentle." "I am not interested in gentle," he replied, eyes steady. "I am interested in true." She studied him. This man who didn't rush her, who named his guilt without decorating it, who brought her evidence instead of flowers. For the first time, she allowed herself a thin ribbon of hope tied around something larger than survival. "All right," she said. "Teach me how to fight with paper." He exhaled, almost a laugh. "It would be my honor." By afternoon, with a social worker's help, they mapped the case like a war room. Dates, forged receipts, testimonies from tenants Balogun extorted. The hospital cafeteria's hum became their soundtrack. Biro inked their artillery. Ada colored in a borrowed notebook, pausing occasionally to announce that a meat pie was, in fact, the best in West Africa. When the sun slanted across the ward and turned the floor to gold, Ngozi reached for Chike's hand. She did it without ceremony, without speech. He looked down at their joined fingers as if he had been handed a fragile heirloom, then looked up with eyes that said thank you louder than words. "I'm not promising perfection," she said, voice barely above the rattle of a trolley in the hall. "But I am promising honesty, and I am promising to try." Chike nodded. "I will match you, step for step." Outside, Lagos carried on, horns and hustles, promises and traps, prayers plattered into traffic. Inside, a woman who had nearly stepped off a bridge sat up in bed and drafted a new ending with a stranger who refused to be a cage. The door, at last, did not creak. It opened. The days after the hospital were delicate, like walking across cracked glass. Ngozi still carried suspicion like a purse she couldn't put down, but she also carried gratitude, heavy, undeniable. Chike respected the distance, visiting less often, sending support quietly. Yet outside their fragile peace, Chief Balogun fumed. Word spread that Ngozi was recovering under Chike's protection. The gossip twisted. Some said she had bewitched him. Others claimed she was a secret wife. The landlord, bruised by his failed attempt to humiliate her, sharpened his anger into vengeance. One afternoon, as Ngozi returned from the chemist with Ada, Balogun appeared in the corridor, blocking the path. His egbada was crisp, but his eyes burned like kerosene. "You think you're safe because of that man," he sneered. "Let him travel, let him turn his back. Then you'll remember who owns this compound, this street, this city." Ngozi gripped Ada's hand tightly, fear pulsing like a drum. But before she could respond, a shadow moved behind her. Chike, tall and steady, stepped forward. "Enough," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried weight. "You will not speak to her again." Neighbors peeked from doors. Children paused mid-play. For the first time, someone had spoken to Chief Balogun without fear. The landlord sputtered, but Chike's calm eyes pinned him down. Balogun retreated with a hiss. "This is not over." Ngozi's chest rose and fell quickly, but in her heart, something shifted. Chike had not just saved her from eviction. He was standing between her and the storm itself. That night, as she tucked Ada into bed, she whispered, "Maybe my end is not in the hands of men who hate me, but in the God who sent one man to fight beside me." Returning to Chike's company felt different this time. Ngozi walked through the Yaba office not as a timid recruit, but as a survivor who had already fought death and shame. The staff noticed it, her confidence, her calm. A marker, once sharp-tongued, approached with surprising softness. "I misjudged you," she admitted quietly one morning. "You've endured more than I imagined. If you'll allow me, I'd like us to work together, not against each other." Ngozi smiled faintly. "Thank you. Life is too short for enemies." The real test came weeks later when a major contract nearly collapsed. A truck loaded with goods was delayed. The client threatened to cancel, and panic filled the office. Amaka froze, unsure how to handle the situation. All eyes turned to Ngozi. She drew on her market days in Balogun, her quick thinking honed by years of haggling. She rerouted the truck through a faster road, reassured the client with firm but respectful words, and even negotiated a small discount to keep the deal alive. By evening, the delivery was completed. The office erupted in applause. For the first time, Ngozi was not seen as a charity case or a woman rescued by luck. She was respected for her skill. Ada's eyes shone with pride when she heard the story. "My mummy is a hero." Chike, watching from the sidelines, smiled quietly. He didn't clap the loudest, but he carried the deepest pride. To him, Ngozi was not just surviving. She was rising. That night, as she walked home under the Lagos streetlights, the city no longer looked like an enemy. It looked like a battlefield she was learning to conquer. Chief Balogun was not done. His pride had been bruised too deeply. He called for a neighborhood meeting, spreading lies that Ngozi was living off a man, that she was corrupting morals, that she was a disgrace to women who worked hard. He expected the crowd to jeer, to condemn, but Ngozi had prepared. With Chike's evidence in her hands, documents, forged receipts, voice recordings. She walked into the gathering not as a victim but as a warrior. The compound was packed. Men sat on benches. Women leaned against walls. Children clung to skates. Balogun stood in the center, his voice booming. This woman has shamed us. She is nothing without a man's pocket. The crowd murmured. Then Ngozi stepped forward. Her voice shook at first, but it grew stronger. I was silent when you mocked me. I was silent when you threw out my belongings. But today, I will be silent no more. She held up the evidence. Here are your lies, your forged eviction notices, your stolen money, your threats to widows. You call me shame? No, Chief Balogun. The shame is yours. Gasps filled the air. A recording played of Balogun's voice, crude and vicious, threatening an elderly tenant. The crowd erupted in outrage. Women shouted curses. Men demanded justice. Balogun tried to protest, but the tide had turned. Chaik stepped forward, not to overshadow Ngozi, but to stand beside her. The truth is spoken. This woman is not a victim. She is a fighter. The cheers drowned out Balogun's sputtering. Neighbors who once whispered against Ngozi now chanted her name. For the first time, the power in the compound shifted. Ngozi's knees trembled, but her heart soared. The woman who once begged for mercy was now the voice of justice. Life after the public reckoning blossomed like harmattan flowers. Ngozi was promoted at Chaik's company, her salary enough to cover Ada's needs and even save. She moved into a modest but comfortable apartment where neighbors greeted her with respect instead of gossip. Amaka became more than a colleague. She became a sister. They worked side by side, their laughter filling the office. Ada thrived in school, often returning home with glowing reports and drawings of her super mummy. But inside, Ngozi wrestled with one last fear, love. Every evening, she remembered Chaik's words on the bridge, his hand reaching into her darkness. She remembered his steady patience, his refusal to force. She knew her heart leaned toward him, but scars whispered caution. One evening, she invited Chaik to dinner in her new home. The table was simple, rice, stew, fried plantain, but it felt like a feast. Ada chatted excitedly, then slipped off to bed. In the quiet that followed, Ngozi's hands trembled as she set down her glass. All my life, doors closed on me, she said softly. But you opened one I never believed existed. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but if you are still willing, I want to walk through that door with you. Chaik's eyes glistened. He reached across the table and took her hand gently, as if holding something sacred. I have been waiting for you to say those words. Not because I needed them, but because you deserve to choose them freely. For the first time, Ngozi allowed herself to exhale fully. The door, her heart, long locked, creaked open. Months later, the hall at a women's empowerment conference in Lagos was filled to the brim. Women of all ages sat in rows, notebooks ready, hearts heavy with their own struggles. On stage, under a banner that read From Endings to New Doors, Ngozi stood tall in a simple but elegant gown. She looked out at the sea of faces, her voice steady. There was a time I thought my story had ended. My shop was gone. My child was hungry. My landlord mocked me, and I almost ended my life on a bridge. But a stranger opened the door. The room was silent, every word sinking deep. That stranger reminded me that despair is not the final chapter. Today, I stand here not because I was rescued, but because I chose to rise. And so can you. The audience erupted. Cheers, tears, claps echoing like thunder. Ada, sitting in the front row, smiled proudly, her eyes shining. Beside her, Chaik watched quietly, his heart full. As the applause washed over her, Ngozi raised a hand. If your end looks certain, remember, one door can change everything. It might be opened by a stranger, but you must choose to walk through it. The crowd rose to their feet. Cameras flashed. Hashtag began to spread on social media within minutes. Ngozi was no longer just a struggling woman in Surulere. She had become a voice of hope across Lagos and beyond. Her end had looked certain, but her beginning had only just unfolded.